NASA's mission is to explore the unknown.
There's more that we don't know than we do know. That's just the nature of the universe.
In the search for answers, it launches its scientists into space, its craft beyond the limits of the solar system.
Taking risks is part of making discoveries. Space exploration is like lighting a match. And we don't know what lurks in the shadows. Hey, what is that? There could be anything out there.
A spacecraft returning from the ISS loses contact with mission control.
There's no sign of the capsule or the crew at the intended landing site.
Scientists capture a mysterious metal sphere high in Earth's atmosphere.
Inside the sphere, it's living biological material, and now it's oozing out.
And images from the surface of Venus reveal something that seems to be moving.
There's clearly something there. The question is, what is it?
NASA's missions have uncovered disturbing anomalies.
Okay, we're seeing 3 or 4 objects.
Now there are 3 objects
that continue to perplex our finest scientific minds. These are NASA's Unexplained files. NASA takes unprecedented steps to ensure the safety of the first manned mission to the moon.
What is an acceptable level of risk?
But recently uncovered documents reveal the space agency's secret plans, preparing for disaster.
We didn't think the first attempt would ever make it.
Spring 1969. NASA makes the final preparations for mankind's first voyage to the moon.
The clock was ticking. You had to reach there to achieve John F. Kennedy's mandate by the end of the decade, sometime in 1969.
NASA does not greenlight the mission to put a man on the moon until every part of the spacecraft is rated 99.9% reliable.
Everything that the astronauts did had been carefully thought out well in advance to minimize the risk.
But members of NASA's astronaut corps have their own private fears.
The feeling amongst the astronaut corps was that there's a big chance that they might not make it.
The vehicle is starting to pressurize. We are go for Apollo 11.
Recently declassified documents suggest NASA was fully prepared for things to go wrong. They contain a speech for the president to deliver if the mission ended in tragedy.
William Safire, president's speechwriter, wrote a speech. That speech talked about the heroic astronauts and how they've given their life for the cause of exploration. It was a very finely crafted speech.
These brave men, Neil Armstrong and Edwin Aldrin, know that there is no hope for their recovery. But they also know that there is hope for mankind in their sacrifice.
The president's staff wrote the speech for what NASA considered to be the most likely disaster scenario. 2 astronauts landing on the moon, but never returning.
You're faced with astronauts who are on the surface and are alive and are there until they run out of oxygen.
People would look at the moon at night and realize 2 dead American astronauts were on the lunar surface forever.
Despite all of NASA's careful preparation, the nightmare scenario outlined in the presidential speech almost came true.
Once they got into the mission, it was fairly straightforward until they went to the landing.
As they enter the final stages of the descent, Armstrong and Aldrin realize there's a problem with the planned landing site.
The automated landing system is going to bring them down in a rocky field.
The minute that Neil saw these boulders, the question was, can he find a place to land?
Contact with a boulder could damage one of the module's landing legs.
If one of those legs were sunk, because we probably can't launch off the moon from there, that's the end of it.
Armstrong disengages the automated controls and manually pilots the module to a new landing site. But the diversion burns up valuable fuel.
He was coming close to running out of gas.
For the astronauts to survive the mission, they must land with enough fuel remaining for takeoff.
He's got a minute of fuel remaining, period.
They are seconds away from the exact scenario NASA most feared.
We were all thinking the odds are not good. We're starting to time it, and he's trying to find a place. He's not talking.
Mission control is less than a minute away from ordering an abort when Armstrong executes a perfect touchdown.
Tranquility
Copy paste here. The Eagle has landed.
They just keep going until they touch down. They did a great job.
Hello, Neil and Buzz. This certainly has to be the most historic telephone call ever made from the White House.
Apollo 11's landing was a close call, just as Neil Armstrong had expected.
Neil Armstrong said he thought he only had a 50% chance of actually making the landing successfully.
No one can be certain of all the risks involved in a feat never before attempted in human history.
We all knew that a lot of luck was involved in this. There were a lot of people up in NASA headquarters that didn't want to make any more landings.
What can be said is that the risk did not deter the pioneers of space travel.
We could perish on the flight. But if we did, the good side of that is that we'd be in the history books forever.
Up next, a spacecraft returning from the International Space Station disappears.
Out of contact with Mission Control. They could be headed for disaster.
A return flight from the International Space Station runs into trouble during re-entry.
It's moving way too fast.
You got smoke in the cockpit. You don't know what it is.
Mission Control loses contact with the spacecraft. Soyuz TMA-11 appears to vanish.
There's no sign of the capsule or the crew at the intended landing site.
April 19th, 2008. At the end of a groundbreaking 6-month mission, NASA's first female commander, Peggy Whitson, undocks from the International Space Station and heads home.
Peggy Whitson has now broken the record for the American female with the most hours in space, and she and her 2 crewmates, they're starting their journey back to Earth.
The 4-hour journey to Earth will be a landmark flight.
It's the first time women actually outnumber men on board a spacecraft since 1963.
Mission Control in Korolev, just outside Moscow, gives them the green light to begin re-entry.
Everything is lined up, all systems are operating normal, and they're set to land in Kazakhstan.
Just as the capsule enters Earth's atmosphere, it starts to shake violently. Smoke appears in the cabin.
You got smoke in the cockpit. You don't know what it is. You don't know where it's coming from. There's not a thing you can do about it.
This is a serious emergency. That capsule could break up at any moment.
The spacecraft is out of control and picking up speed as it hurtles towards Earth.
They're tearing through the atmosphere at 25 times the speed of sound. At that speed, the G-forces can do serious damage.
Inside the Soyuz, the crew experiences 8 times the force of Earth's gravity crushing their bodies.
I can only imagine what Peggy was feeling as these 8G spikes were going through her body.
I can tell you from landing in the space shuttle that 3Gs is a lot to experience.
G-force can kill you. It's basically like getting crushed by big waves.
The uncontrolled flight also inflicts critical damage to the Soyuz heat shield.
The outside of the spacecraft is heating up to in excess of 3,000 degrees. They've lost contact with Mission Control. The antenna has burned off.
Russian Mission Control receives no data from the craft during re-entry, but it soon becomes clear that it's a problem.
Out of contact with Mission Control. They could be headed for disaster.
There's no sign of the capsule or the crew at the intended landing site. Mission Control are extremely concerned.
Publicly, the Russian space agency Roscosmos gives no hint of the potential disaster.
Russian TV is announcing their safe return, another textbook mission.
The fate of Peggy Whitson and the rest of the crew remains unknown, until a farmer 250 miles from the planned landing site sees something in the sky.
Some Kazakh farmers see essentially an explosion in the sky and what looks like debris falling to the ground.
They hear a boom, see smoke in the sky, and then see a spacecraft seem to explode.
It's the capsule. The heat shield separates, the parachute's deployed, but it still slams into the ground.
Over 3 tons of capsule and crew crashes down onto the hard Kazakh plain.
The farmers rush over, expecting to find carnage. It could be a very grave situation.
Incredibly, the 3 astronauts inside are badly shaken, but otherwise unharmed.
It's remarkable to be able to experience that and then be able to get out of the vehicle and go home.
Their terrifying elevator drop from space was what scientists call a ballistic entry.
A ballistic entry is typically in emergency mode when some of the systems have failed and it's not possible to accurately control the entry.
A ballistic entry endangers both the spacecraft and the crew.
The descent module comes at an extreme steep angle.
That's just a big round sphere coming in. There's no control.
You're going to be swinging, you're going to be spinning.
G-forces build up to very extreme levels.
Quite honestly, it's going to be like a car crash.
Something must have happened to the Soyuz module to send it into this highly unusual flight path. Astonishingly, the Russians claim the cause of the accident was the female-dominated crew.
According to the head of the Russian Space Agency, it wasn't maybe a technical malfunction so much as a gender problem.
Permanov was actually quoted as saying, when a majority of the crew is female, sometimes certain kinds of unsanctioned behavior or something else occurs.
Permanov's statement clearly blames the female-dominated crew for the ballistic entry.
Roscosmos initially stated that the crew changed the flight plan just before re-entry.
But NASA suspects a technical fault.
The answer turns out to be explosive.
Just before re-entry, the astronaut capsule of the Soyuz is attached to a service module. The two parts of the spacecraft are supposed to separate with the detonation of 5 exploding bolts that connect them.
One of the 5 pyro bolts holding the craft together failed to detonate.
Which means that the two modules stay connected for 100 seconds more than they normally should.
Failure to separate on time is what sends the Soyuz off course.
With that bolt attached, it's almost like the descent module is coming in with a trailer attached to the back of it. This is not the way you want to enter Earth's atmosphere.
As soon as the problem is identified, all existing Soyuz spacecraft are modified to prevent the accident from reoccurring. But one unmodified capsule is still docked with the space station.
Cosmonauts Volkov and Kononenko went and did a 6-hour spacewalk and actually disconnected the pyro bolt that doesn't fire on that spacecraft.
The Soyuz is still the primary means for travel to and from the ISS. The hard lessons learned from Peggy Whitson's experience will benefit all future astronauts who serve there.
Peggy's experience coming home in a burning, tumbling Soyuz getting 8 Gs is similar to what Sandra Bullock went through in the movie Gravity. That's one of the things that we as astronauts do. We get ourselves ready for the unknown.
Still to come, scientists capture an unidentified metallic sphere high in Earth's atmosphere.
It's living biological material, and now it's oozing out.
Scientists discover a mysterious metallic sphere hurtling into our atmosphere.
It is made principally of titanium, which is incredible.
A close inspection seems to reveal something alive inside.
If what we're saying is correct, then this changes everything.
July 31st, 2013. A team of astrobiologists from the University of Sheffield searches for signs of alien life infiltrating our atmosphere. They use weather balloons equipped with GPS technology to gather evidence.
The use of weather balloons is a simple but effective way of seeing what's up there in the stratosphere. We have a CD drawer which can open and close at any altitude we choose. When it's open, it contains these little round stubs, and the material falls onto the stubs. Very straightforward, very simple.
The research rig flies 16 miles up to reach the stratosphere. At this altitude, temperatures reach minus 68 Fahrenheit, and 100-mile-an-hour winds are common.
We're talking about essentially fishing trips. We send up balloons and we catch what we catch.
After 17 minutes of sampling at 84,000 feet, the CD drawer closes and the payload parachutes back to Earth. The team follows strict protocols to prevent contamination while taking the samples back to the lab for analysis.
So we put the stubs into this very high-powered scanning electron microscope that looks at the surface of the stub.
The samples sit on small circles of sterile carbon. On one of them, the team spots a strange sphere about the width of a human hair.
Now this is a photograph, an image of what we see down the electron microscope. You can see it's a spherical ball. I don't know why it's spherical, except that spheres are very stable objects.
Some observers claim the sample is no mystery. It is similar in size to grass seeds or grains of pollen. Both occur naturally at high altitudes.
There have been records even of spiders being found in the stratosphere and microbes. If hurricanes and other weather phenomena can bring up spiders into the atmosphere, then yes, I would expect that grass seeds and pollen can get there as well.
The Sheffield team bombards the strange sphere with X-rays to get clues to its chemical composition.
We did EDEX analysis, X-ray analysis. We find that it is made principally of titanium with a little bit of vanadium, which is incredible.
Titanium is a rare metal, normally found deep in the Earth's crust, not over 15 miles above the Earth's surface. Microscopic investigation of the sample reveals another startling discovery. A dent in the hard carbon surface of the sample collection stub resembles a tiny impact site.
So we've got this amazing impact crater. Now that is kind of equivalent to the impact crater that an asteroid would cause if it hit the Earth. So we think this is a mini asteroid, as it were.
But critics point out that finding titanium entering Earth's atmosphere is possible. It could simply be a fragment of space junk.
One has to remember that there are particles of titanium in Earth orbit that re-enter all the time. These are particles that are put there by exploding spacecraft in low Earth orbit. It's not surprising that they eventually get captured by the Earth's atmosphere and come down.
When the team attempts to move the sphere, they make a disturbing discovery that makes the space junk hypothesis seem unlikely.
When we move the ball across, material streams from the ball. When we do an analysis on that, we find it's made of carbon and oxygen with a bit of nitrogen.
There is something oozing from the metal sphere, and tests reveal the strange material contains organic matter.
So it's living biological material, we believe. So this material has been inside the sphere, and now, because we're moving it across, it's oozing out.
The discovery of organic matter inside the sphere opens the door to an amazing hypothesis.
When I say this sphere, one possibility that comes to mind is that maybe it's a delivery system for panspermia.
The idea of panspermia is life everywhere, that microorganisms could be widely distributed throughout the cosmos and could be traveling from one body to another.
Seeds can travel through space. Spores can travel through space. Life is not blocked by space.
Not everyone accepts the claim that the sphere is transporting life from an alien world.
It seems a leap to suggest that it comes from outer space rather than from Earth. Exceptional claims require exceptional evidence.
It is unlikely that such a tiny piece of metal could have traveled across space on its own, but the Sheffield team believes it may have been part of something bigger.
So what we're thinking is possibly this material comes from comets, so it's coming in large pieces of ice.
Life could be trapped in the ice and sent out from other parts of the solar system that could then travel to Earth, go through the atmosphere, and land in our oceans and take up residence.
If the metal sphere is indeed traveling between planets, seeding biological material, the implications are staggering.
If what we're saying is correct, then this changes everything. It changes biology. Biology is no longer an Earth-centered subject. It's connected to the cosmos. We're talking about life everywhere.
Still to come, an astronaut on a spacewalk discovers damage to his suit.
I actually do have a little bit of a hole.
Astronaut lives are at stake. NASA has to investigate.
200 miles above the surface of the Earth, an astronaut discovers a breach in his spacesuit.
There seems to be some kind of a cut on his glove.
You get a hole in your suit. That could kill you very quickly.
NASA launches an investigation to find out what caused the potentially deadly damage.
They noticed several cuts at the fingertips on both of my gloves, as if someone had taken a razor blade and cut the rubber material.
From Rick Mastracchio's helmet camera, good view as Clay Anderson emerges to begin the second spacewalk of his career.
August 15th, 2007. ISS astronauts Rick Mastracchio and Clay Anderson are almost 5 hours into a spacewalk. Their mission is to reposition one of the station's communications antennae.
An astronaut outside doing EVA is able to improvise or fix things that might be more difficult to do robotically. Humans are very flexible and adaptable, and that's one of the reasons why it's useful to have humans in space.
Rick Mastracchio, at the end of the station's robotic arm, takes a ride to the P6 solar array truss structure.
With 2.5 hours of the mission remaining, Mastracchio carries out a routine check on his gear.
Suddenly he notices that on his left thumb, there seems to be some kind of a cut on his glove.
I actually do have a little bit of a hole.
What should have been a routine spacewalk becomes an emergency.
You're in the hard vacuum of space, and you get a hole in your suit. That could kill you very quickly.
If you lose the pressure in your suit, your fluids in your body would begin to boil.
Despite the danger, Mastracchio keeps cool and reports the damage to mission control.
Yeah, kind of about halfway. Yeah, I see it.
The danger of a suit rupture forces mission control to order an abort.
The reaction is to get back inside the space station as quickly as possible.
Yeah, back to the airlock and do the terminate procedure. Okay.
Mastracchio's tasks remain uncompleted, but with the astronaut's life at stake, there is no alternative.
You can't ignore something like this. When astronaut lives are at stake, NASA has to investigate.
Mastracchio survives, but NASA needs to find out what caused the potentially deadly damage to his glove.
The primary layer of his glove in the left thumb, he had some damage to that.
Mastracchio could have been hit by a micrometeoroid.
It's something we worry about, micrometeoroid debris actually hitting a suit.
Spacesuits are designed to withstand anything an EVA can throw at them.
The spacesuit is designed to absorb the impact of a micrometeoroid in much the same way that something like a bulletproof vest would be.
To absorb the impact of micrometeoroids flying faster than a rifle bullet, modern spacesuits use layers of a special type of polyester called mylar.
Mylar is very thin, so you can add a lot of layers in a small area, and by adding all those layers, each layer is able to absorb a little bit of the impact force of something like a micrometeoroid. By the time the micrometeoroid gets to the layer that holds the air in, it doesn't have enough force to puncture the suit.
If the damage to Mastracchio's glove did not happen outside the space station, it must have happened inside.
The astronauts take very good care of the spacesuits and all the hardware.
There's no way this suit would have been damaged inside the station, because that is one of the things we check very carefully before anybody goes out the hatch.
But Rick Mastracchio is not the first astronaut to suffer an unexpected tear in his gloves. In October 2000, Leroy Chow was installing power converter units on the ISS exterior.
So on my second space shuttle mission, I'm outside doing 2 spacewalks. And it wasn't until after the mission was over that they noticed several cuts at the fingertips on both of my gloves, as if someone had taken a razor blade and cut the rubber material.
NASA launches an investigation to find out what is slicing its spacesuits. The 2-week inquiry reaches an astonishing conclusion. The perpetrator is the ISS itself.
When you're on a spacewalk, you're spacewalking with your hands along these handrails.
The handrails along the sides of the ISS help astronauts move quickly and easily in zero gravity, but they are constantly exposed to the hazards of space.
Micrometeoroid damage causes pitting and then can actually cause a sharp edge to be formed. In that case, if an astronaut then runs his hand over it, it's possible to cut the glove.
You can actually see tiny metal fibers underneath it.
The threat of these tiny, jagged metal craters forces NASA to revise its EVA procedures.
On the spacewalks we do now, every 45 minutes as you're getting a sunrise or a sunset, they're also having you physically report to them. What do your gloves look like? Do you see any damage to your glove from the last time you reported to me? When you get back inside after your spacewalk, the first thing they do before they take your gloves off is they photograph your glove so that you can document what may or may not have happened to them.
To combat the threat, NASA is developing a new generation of spacesuits.
Skin suit development is underway currently by NASA and by others around the world, and these suits look nothing like the suits that you're used to seeing. They're skin tight, they're dynamic. This is a put it on, tighten the suit, walk out the door, do your business in space. It's an entirely new paradigm for spacesuit design.
Up next, a mysterious moon orbiting Saturn vanishes from the night sky.
By the laws of physics that we know of anyway, moons don't do that.
A legendary astronomer discovers a new moon.
This is a major scientific discovery.
But within weeks of its discovery, the moon vanishes.
This is baffling. Where did it go?
October 25th, 1671. At the newly built Paris Observatory, astronomer Giovanni Cassini begins his observations of Saturn.
Imagine yourself as Giovanni Cassini. In the 17th century, he's using a very rudimentary telescope, pointing it at Saturn.
Cassini notices something passing across the face of the ring planet. He finds a moon. Astronomers later name it Iapetus, after one of the Titans from Greek mythology.
Discovering a moon of a planet is a major discovery. You want to make sure you've got it right. And so night after night, Giovanni is looking through his telescope, looking at Iapetus.
But as it passes to the eastern side of Saturn, Iapetus vanishes.
One night, while he's watching, it disappears.
It's like some huge cosmic magic trick.
Poof.
By the laws of physics that we know of anyway, moons don't do that. And he needed to find out what it was.
Cassini comes up with a theory to solve the mystery.
He had one idea. The idea was that one side of the moon was bright, and the other side of the moon was dark. When it was coming towards you, you could see it. It was nice and bright. When it was going away, you couldn't see it. But how could that be? No planet is like that. No moon is like that.
And liftoff of the Cassini spacecraft on a 30-mile trip to Saturn.
Cassini's theory remains untested for more than 300 years. In 1997, NASA launches a probe toward Saturn named after the great astronomer.
Cassini carries the most sophisticated suite of scientific instruments ever taken into the outer solar system.
When the probe flies by Iapetus, it sends back high-definition images that reveal something completely unexpected.
What you see is this ridge of material going around the equator of the moon. It's an amazingly high ridge. It's about 3 times larger than Everest.
The ridge is colossal, 800 miles long and up to 12 miles high.
We're seeing something that's unique in the solar system, a geographical feature that basically crosses the entire object. Where does such a large, coherent, beautiful structure come from? How is it created?
Astronomers struggle to explain the presence of the mountainous ridge on a world that should not be geologically active.
The best theory we have right now is that something came in and impacted the surface of Iapetus. An enormous ring of debris sprung up around the planet. This ring circled around Iapetus and spread itself out, but eventually was drawn back down onto the planet, creating this ring-like structure at its equator.
But the Cassini data offers no supporting evidence for the theory that an impact created the ridge on Iapetus.
We've been in orbit now for a long time, and we still really don't know what causes this ridge. It may be one of those mysteries that, stays with us even after Cassini is over.
The images from the probe raise a new mystery, but they also offer an answer to an old one.
They confirmed that, yes, in fact, Iapetus has 2 sides. It has a light side and a dark side.
The surface of the light side is bright, shining ice, but the other, dark side, is covered in a strange material of unknown origin.
Of course, the question was, where did that dark material come from?
The first theory scientists consider is that the dark material could be from volcanic activity.
Some people believe that internal processes cause this. Volcanoes spraying out materials.
But the Cassini images show no signs of any volcanoes.
There's no volcanism or anything that reveals any kind of geological activity.
The dark side remains a mystery, until NASA directs the gaze of the infrared Spitzer Space Telescope toward the disappearing moon.
Even farther out from Saturn is a ring that we can't see, but we can see it with infrared. What Spitzer is showing us is this enormous, vast ring of dust, previously completely unknown.
The enormous ring surrounds one of Saturn's lesser-known moons.
It's actually so thick that 20 Saturns could be stacked up inside of it. And inside that ring is another moon called Phoebe.
Phoebe is an unusual dark color and appears to be disintegrating.
Phoebe is very peculiar. As it warms up from the sun's radiation going around Saturn, it's emitting all sorts of material. It's like this old car spewing out all kinds of sooty dust as it goes, and leaving this ring of material around Saturn.
NASA scientists believe the disintegrating moon is the most likely source of the dark material covering one side of Iapetus.
Iapetus is circling Saturn, and every time it goes around, it smashes into this ring from Phoebe, and it's like accumulating bugs on a windshield of a car, and so this dusting accumulates onto the front surface of Iapetus as it circles around, and indeed, it's the leading surface of Iapetus in its orbit that is dark.
More than 3 centuries after Cassini first discovered the disappearing moon, the spacecraft that bears his name is still pushing back the frontiers of science.
It's still giving us all sorts of mysteries to try to solve.
Still to come, images from the planet Venus appear to show something moving on the surface.
In one shot, it's here, and in the next shot, it's over here.
A Soviet space probe reaches the hottest planet in the solar system.
Venus is really an inhospitable place to visit.
The probe sends back images, which seem to show something moving on the surface.
No life form we know of can exist at those temperatures. So what is it?
March 1982. The Soviet Venera 13 space probe nears the end of its 4-month journey to the planet Venus. A lander packed with a payload of cameras and scientific instruments plunges more than 30 miles through clouds of sulfuric acid to reach the surface.
America may be the first nation to land humans on the moon, but the Soviet Union nails the exploration of Venus.
If you look at all of our space exploration, a lot of it has been focused on the moon and Mars, and Venus is kind of left behind. But Venus may be the most interesting place to observe.
In the Cold War era, the Soviets keep the findings of the probe a closely guarded secret.
During the 1970s and 80s, we knew very little about the Venera missions to Venus.
It takes 3 decades before a Russian scientist, Leonid Kosmophamalidy, reveals astonishing images from the Soviet archives.
He's reanalyzing pictures, and he notices something rather strange.
There's something unusual in the barren landscape.
There's clearly something there. The question is, what is it?
He sees what looks like a disc.
The disc seems to be moving.
In one shot, it's here, and in the next shot, it's over here.
But NASA image analysis suggests that the anomaly is not a single object that moved. It is actually 2 separate but similar-looking objects which have fallen from the spacecraft itself.
NASA photo analysts, upon reviewing the photographs, have concluded that it was actually probably the lens caps from the 2 Venera cameras.
But the Russian scientist spots another shape in the image that is harder to explain.
He sees what appears to be a scorpion to him.
Kosmophamalidy declares the probe's cameras have captured evidence of life on Venus.
A scorpion-like creature on the surface of Venus sounds a little out there, but is there a way that Venus could support life?
Any life on Venus would face huge problems.
There are a lot of unappealing places in our solar system, but probably none as unappealing as Venus.
If you decided to take a stroll on Venus, it'd be unlike anything you'd ever experienced. The atmosphere would be crushing on your body. The rocks underneath your feet would be red hot, almost molten, ready to melt.
The surface temperature on Venus is over 800 degrees Fahrenheit. That's hot enough to melt lead.
Venus is often said to be Earth's sister planet, although this is not the sister you'd like to get to know better because of the high temperatures.
In the absence of any further evidence for the existence of scorpion creatures on Venus, we can only guess at what the shape in the image might be.
My take on this image is that we're looking at a furrow that was dug by this instrument cover after it was ejected from the Venera 13 craft.
NASA sends its own probe, Pioneer, to conduct research into the possibility of life on Venus.
There's an important zone on Venus, which is actually surprisingly Earth-like, and that is the clouds, the high clouds, which are occurring at temperatures and pressures that are not that different from Earth's surface.
In the clouds of Venus, there are constant rains of sulfuric acid, which would be deadly to most known forms of life, but not all.
We do know life on Earth exists in very inhospitable places. So, for example, in caves, you get some bacteria, these extremophile bacteria, that can exist in a very acidic environment, somewhat like being in your car battery.
If life can thrive in acid environments on Earth, it can exist within the acid clouds of Venus.
Who knows what could exist in the clouds of Venus? It would be a whole ecosystem structured from bottom to top, from the simplest to the most complex. You could have predators flying through. You could have huge colonial creatures living above in the clouds, moving like beautiful balloons floating over the surface of Venus. Who knows? Because nature always amazes us when it comes to life.
Today, scientists are investigating if Venus could support another form of life, humankind.
If humans are going to survive indefinitely into the future, we're going to have to leave Earth. We see in the fossil record that from time to time, much of Earth's life gets wiped out. And the more planets we have, the better.
Surviving in the Venusian clouds might not be as far-fetched as it sounds.
The source of oxygen is already there. It's just a matter of extracting it from the carbon dioxide. Water's there, nitrogen's there. You don't really need to import any basic life support material. It's all there. You just need to process it.
The technology to turn these ideas into realities is already in development.
Inflatable modules are already being considered for the International Space Station, so it is not such a big step to imagine that that kind of technology could be used to make a habitat that could float in the atmosphere of Venus.
Could Earth's twisted sister become our next home?
It's pure speculation today, but we could see at some point in the future a human colony on Venus.
Almost half a century after man first set foot on the moon, there are still aspects of the mission shrouded in mystery.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
The archives of Cold War rivals still contain secrets. And new discoveries challenge everything we think we know.